Okay, we're just a day late and a half an hour. 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Okay. But we're on, Baruch Hashem. Okay, anybody that wants to dedicate this class, let us know. We are holding over here. This week we're reading Parshat Tzav. Next week is Pesach. Next week, Monday, Bez Hashem, we'll have a Pesach class. Also tune in tomorrow night. We're having our last of the series, Exploring Exodus. Thursday night is also going to be a class on Pesach. So there's a lot of Pesach happening, but now we want to pay attention to this week's Torah portion, Parshat Tzav, and see if we find something really cool. Now, we do have something really cool this week's Parsha. And that is as follows. The Torah talks about it does a review on the sacrifices, and most of the sacrifices that are already laid out in last week's Torah portion, and in this week's Torah portion, it fills in the missing parts of every sacrifice. So the main category of sacrifices we learned in the last week Torah portion is the burnt offering, which is the korban olah, and then we had the mincha, which is the meal offering, which wasn't from animal, was made out of flour, whatever. Different types of matzahs that were baked and so on and so forth. It's called the meal offering. And then we had the shalomim offering, which was the peace offering. And then we had the sin offering and the guilt offering. That was mostly the entire Torah portion of last week's Torah portion, Parshas Vayikra. It gives us the main laws of all these sacrifices. Parshas Tzav, in the second Torah portion in Leviticus, it kind of goes back to all those sacrifices, albeit in a different order. It follows a different order, not exactly. It starts with the burnt offering, but it veers off and doesn't follow. It puts the sin offering and the guilt offering before the peace offering, but it adds just things that were left out, just a few regarding some laws that were kind of missed. And obviously, there's a deep, reason in the Torah of God's infinite wisdom why He left those out initially, and now He goes back and He says, "Those Torahs ha'olah, those Torahs. This is the Torah of this. This is the Torah of this one." That's the outlet. That's the overlay of this week's Torah portion. The conclusion of the Torah portion deals with the 7 days of filling, which were the 7 days before the month of Nisan, when Aaron and his sons were being inaugurated into the service of the temple. The priests were becoming priests. The 7 days of inauguration, which Moshe himself was acting as the main officiator in the temple. And in those days, every single day, the temple was built and disassembled. The tabernacle, built and disassembled. Shiva Simei HaMaluyim. That's the conclusion of Parshas Tzav. Leading into next week's Torah portion called Shmini, which is referring to the 8th day, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, was when they actually permanently set up the tabernacle, as permanent as it was. Wasn't permanent at all because it was always disassembled, but at least it was not taken down daily. It was there as long as until they moved to the next place. And that's called the actual inauguration, not the pre-inauguration ceremony, but the actual inauguration. And over there you had the princes of each tribe brought for 12 days. Every day another prince from a different tribe brought a special sacrifice, which we are now in the midst of in the month of Nisan. And every day we're supposed to read the Parsha of the Nasi, and we say a special prayer at the end. Fine. But this is 7 days prior to that. So that's the conclusion of Parshas Tzav. So again, first half of Parshas Tzav deals with filling in various points that were not laws, that were not related in last week's Torah portion, but now it's reviewing and filling it in, and then you'll have the second half. Now, in the middle of the mix, Hashem throws in another korban, which belongs to the category of the meal offering, which is the mincha. Mincha is a meal offering, but it's a particular one. It's a meal offering coming from a priest. Which a meal offering coming from a priest, which means when a priest himself is bringing the offering, not an ordinary Jew is bringing the offering. It's when the priest, the Kohen, is bringing the offering. So it has special laws. But in addition to that, a Kohen who was for the first time ever officiating in the temple, the day that he's entering in to become a Kohen officially to work. You don't become a Kohen, you're born a Kohen. But the day that he would be, you have to reach a certain age in order to be able to work in the temple. I think you have to be 20 years old. So the first day that he was, entering in, on that day, it's only a once in a lifetime, he would bring a special meal offering. It was made like a meal offering of 12 breads, fried breads. 6 of them were offered in the morning and 6 were offered in the evening. Now, that's a regular Kohen. The high priest, Aaron, he would bring that offering daily. Every single day, he was like being inaugurated from them. I guess when you reach very, very high levels, you got to start every day from them. Because if the moment you become comfortable and you think you belong there, then out. So when you're a high priest, you have to be so sensitive that every day it's like your inauguration. So there was a meal offering that was brought every single day. It accompanied the morning burnt offering. In the temple, there was a morning burnt offering that was offered every day, and an afternoon one. The morning offering was the first offering of the day. You couldn't offer anything else before and it belonged to everybody. It was a communal offering. And the afternoon one was the last one that was offered every day. And in between that, everybody that wanted to bring private sacrifices could bring. But it had to be sandwiched between these two. Now, the meal offering of the high priest that was brought daily, these 12 matzahs, or challah type of matzahs, whatever, they were never leavened in the Beis HaMikdash, besides very unique specific cases when they brought leavened bread. But like this, they were matzah. So 6 were offered in the morning and 6 were offered in the evening. Okay? A regular Kohen would have the same thing, but only once in his lifetime. So verse, this is in Perek Vav, chapter 6 in Leviticus, in Vayikra, Pasuk Yud Beis, verse number 12. It says, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, God spoke to Moshe, Zeh karban Aaron ubanav. This should be the karban of Aaron, the high priest, ubanav, and his children, Asher yakrivu Hashem, that they should offer to God, b'yomi mashach oisai, on the day that he was anointed. So, remember I mentioned earlier, a regular Kohen, on the day that he officiates and enters into the service, he brings this sacrifice. However, the Kohen Gadol the high priest brought this every single day. Asira se'efa, okay. Now, how do we know the Kohen brings it every? And it goes on to tell you exactly how it was made. It was a certain tenth of an ephah, which is a measure of flour, and it was made out of pure flour from fine wheat, and fine flour from wheat. Half in the morning, and it was fried in a frying pan. It was very oily, and this was offered. And it was baked a couple of times. It was a whole procedure. That's it. That's what the pasuk says. But here's a cool midrash. The midrash says, I couldn't find the midrash, so I don't know what my midrash rabbah disappeared. I think it's a very big book, and I didn't like that it was not fitting in, and I stuck it somewhere, and I don't know where I stuck it, even as a big book. Okay. The midrash rabbah this week says as follows: Zeh karban Aaron. But today's days, Google gets you everything, so you can pull up the midrash. So it says like this: on the word Zeh karban Aaron, this should be the offering of Aaron. So the midrash brings a verse from Shoftim, from Judges, 14:14, chapter 14 in Judges, verse number 14 in Judges, where it says, Vayomer lahem, he says to them, Me'ha'oichel yotza machol, from the eater comes out food, and from the hard or tough comes out sweetness. What is it referring to? It's a riddle that Samson, Shimshon HaGibor, the mighty Samson, is testing and teasing and challenging the Philistines. You see, we all know that Shimshon HaGibor, Samson the Mighty, married a Philistine girl. That was a way that he can get in there, and it was a whole scheme. His parents were very angry at that because the Philistines were at war with the Jewish people, and in general, for him to marry and out of the, okay, he converted her, but the whole situation was not good. But it was God's will. The verse says specifically, they didn't know that it was God's will that he should marry her. And that's how I guess his ability to take care of business over there was when he was inside. In any case, by his wedding, he was in a very, very, very cheerful mood, and he threw out a riddle to them, to the Philistines, and he challenged them. And the riddle was as follows: if they were able to solve the riddle, then he has to pay them a certain amount of clothing and a certain amount of money. I think it was. If they do not, he gave them the challenge and they accepted the challenge. If not, they need to give him 30 changes of clothing and also money to him. He was sure they would never get the riddle. They would never figure it out. And what did he say to them? He said to them these words. I'll read to you. Shoftim Yudalit, the words he says to them. And he says to them, he said to them, from the eater emerges food, and from the strong emerges sweetness. What's he referring to? So he was telling them, so they were thinking it's some ancient parable, it's some deep, deep cosmic secret. And they were trying to figure this out. They gave up in the end, but they didn't want to pay the money. They knew that the deal was a deal, and they didn't want to pay. And they knew with Samson, they took a look at his muscles, and they said they're not interested in fighting with him. So they knew that he's going to force them to pay up. So what did they do? They went to his wife, and they threatened her, and they put a lot of pressure on her that she should get the secret out of him, like they kept on doing later in his life. And that's how the end they got him. But the end, she squeezed out the secret from him, and she told it to them, and that's how they came in the last day that they had a chance, and in the end, Samson had to pay up because she spilled the beans on the secret that he had told her. But he knew they could never crack the riddle. What was it? It was as follows. On his way down to meet this girl or to go marry her, he was going with his parents, but then he took his own path. Some commentaries say he took an own path because since he was considered a Nazarite, he was a Nazir, and he had to keep away from wine, that he wasn't allowed to walk through a vineyard. And the path was through the vineyard. So they walked the shortcut, he went the long way. On the way, he was encountered by a lion, a young lion. He didn't have any weapons on him but he was Samson the Mighty. So he took the lion and he shredded the lion with his bare hands. He tore it. And he left it there. Didn't tell anybody. Went down, I think, and he got engaged to his Philistine girlfriend. And now he's on his way back. He comes back to look at the dead carcass of the lion. And he sees that bees have created a beehive in the carcass. So now there's a whole beehive inside the carcass. So he goes and he pulls out. I don't know how he got rid of the bees, but I guess if he's Samson, the Shimshon HaGibor, you can deal with bigger problems in life. So he figured out how to get out of the bees. And he managed to pull the honeycomb out from the beehive. And he squeezed the honeycomb and he got a whole bunch of honey. And he brought it for him. He was eating it himself and he was giving it to his parents. Fine. And this was his riddle. Because the lion is the fiercest of all the animals. And now the lion became a food source. Because from the lion came the food. The lion, who is the predator, the fierce predator that eats everybody up, that lion itself is now become food. The bees found the carcass of the lion a place to create their beehive and then produce food, which is the honey and so forth. And from the strong one, which is the lion, comes sweetness. So the mighty, dangerous lion is now a source of candy, a candy lion. So Samson thought that was amusing, and maybe he wanted to, in the end, just let them know that exactly what his intentions were with this. Maybe if they would know, he would go show them, and then they would recognize what, where, and when, and maybe he would let them know his might and his strength, so they wouldn't mess with him. I'm just guessing that, but that could have been the intention of this whole situation. But there's got to be something much deeper over here. What's the story over here? From a lion comes in. But what does the midrash want over here? Why is the midrash saying this over here on the verse? Zeh karban Aaron. This is the karban of Aaron. The midrash says, from the eater comes food. What does the midrash mean? Aaron is the big lion, because he's the one who offers all the sacrifices. When you have a sacrifice that you want to bring, who do you come to? You come to the Kohen. And if you want to really go, you go to the chief Kohen, the chief priest, the high priest. He's the one who elevates, and everybody sacrifices. So the midrash is wondering, and now Aaron has to bring a sacrifice. He himself has to bring some kind of an offering. He is the offerer of all the offerings, and now he is bringing an offering. So the midrash is connecting this to the idea from the eater will become the eaten. You have to understand what's such a shocking, why is this such a shock? So what's wrong? He offers sacrifices. He's the chosen one to bring up the offerings. And Aaron as well also needs atonement, or also needs a sack to bring an offering. What's this whole idea that the midrash seems to be like shocked by this. And then we need to understand what was the greatness of this riddle. Why is this? I mean, it's maybe neat, but nothing that, amazing that it has to turn into a biblical statement. From the eater becomes the eaten, becomes food. What's the idea over here? What's the deep secret over here? What's the deep significance over here? So there's another verse, and the verse is in Joel, in Yoel. In Joel and Yoel Bays, chapter number 2, verse 26. It says, V'achaltem ochel, you will eat food. But usually, simply, it's V'achaltem ochel, you will eat food. V'savaya, you will be satiated. V'ilautem Hashem Hashem, and you're going to praise the name of God. Hashem Elokem Elokechem, God your Lord. Asher asa imochem lahafli, which God made to you. Hashem brought to you such wonders. He brought you to a state of such wonders. And my people will never be shamed forever. In other words, all shame will go away. For all of time, you won't be ashamed anymore. Simply, this is a verse speaking about prophecies regarding the future, regarding the Messianic age. I mean, even though this is talking about after there was a terrible famine in the land in the days of Job, because in his days there was a plague of locusts devastated the land of Israel. So this is talking about the aftermath. So simply it's saying there will be food again. There won't be a food shortage. Food will come back in the land of Israel and so forth. The prophet is saying that. But as the commentators explain, that this is referring to a Messianic prophecy. And in the days of Mashiach, there will be so much, simply, as the Mefarshim say, there will be so much food that you won't be eating just to satiate the hunger. You're going to be eating in a state that will, to satisfaction. Eating just to bring extra satisfaction, v'savoa, in a state of satisfaction, not food just to quill the hunger, which has been the story of humanity, most of the world, for most human beings. People are very hungry. We're living in a time these days of an enormous abundance. So much food for people in most places. I mean, there's still hungry people, but in general. So people eat today, and the biggest problem today is overeating. That's our problem. That's the billion dollar industry of people trying to figure out how to curb their food intake, which is Messianic on its own. Because for thousands of years, that was never the problem. Problem wasn't obesity. The problem was people were starving. Today's days, there's so much available that. But in any case, so that's what the prophet is saying. You will eat, v'savoa, you'll be satiated. And you will thank God for all the wonders that he's done. And you'll never be ashamed anymore. The Metzudas explains, you won't be ashamed anymore. You'll never have to run away from the land of Israel because of a famine and go amongst the other nations to look for food, like it happened many times in the past. It happened with our father Abraham. You have to go down Amram, you have to go down to Mitzrayim. The tribes had to go down to Egypt to go get food. It's always uncomfortable when you need to come on to the favors of others, especially of another nation, especially Jews who were never that loved amongst the other people. So when they had to go down because of food, they were always in a disadvantage. So the prophet is saying it will never happen again. There will be plenty. It will be wonder. You'll thank God for all the unbelievable abundance. Okay? However, when you take a look a little deeper at this verse, you see it says, V'achaltem ochol. It doesn't say, V'achaltem machol. You will eat food. It says, V'achaltem, you will eat. Ochol, you will eat. Or better, you will eat the eaters. That's the literal translation. Ochol means the one who eats. V'achaltem, you will eat. Ochol, the one who eats. V'savoya, and you will reach satiation. Similar to the idea that we were just talking about. That we're talking about the lion, who is the eater, who is now being eaten. He's becoming food. And Aaron, who is the one who is bringing the heavenly eating, who consumes all the sacrifices, not himself, but he brings them all to the altar. And also, the Kohanim, the priests, they would participate in the sacrificial meats, and that was part of its elevation. And yet we say that the Kohen, from him becomes a meal. He too brings an offering. Well, who elevates the meal of the Kohen if the Kohen is himself coming to bring something to be elevated? Who elevates the elevator when the elevator is broken and the elevator needs to be elevated? You got to bring an outside crane, right? When it uses an elevator, the elevator elevates everybody. But when the elevator breaks, and you have to elevate the elevator itself, ooh, then you need some super, super powerful cranes to pull the elevator up. So here we're talking about a situation where we're saying that there are those, the elevated and the elevated themselves, Aaron, the lion, become food, become elevated. So watch this mysterious teaching. In this week, what we call the Hasidic Parsha, the Hasidic Torah portion. What do I mean Hasidic Torah portion? It's one Torah portion, but there is a book that we read every Thursday night called Torah Lakuti Torah, Torah Or, and that's called the Hasidic Parsha because it's the discourses of the Hasidic masters, in Chabad at least, that gave commentary on the Parsha, and that it was labeled the Hasidic Parsha because it gives you the deep, mystical, deep Hasidic insights into the Torah portion. So in this week's Hasidic Parsha, the opening discourse of Parsha Tzav is about this mysterious idea of the eater being eaten. Now, he says a stunning idea. A stunning idea. The human being has been given the job to be the eater, to be the consumer. We eat, we consume. And our eating is no small business. It's not just a physical action. Our eating should be and could be a cosmic elevation of all of existence. Why? On the simple level, let's put it very simple. The second instruction that God gave Adam was about food. I used to say the first instruction, but then when I looked carefully, there was one thing he told him first. I don't remember. I don't have the Chumash Bereshis in front of me, but literally in the second verse that he converses with him, he tells him about eating. It must mean that It's not only for the survival of the human. If eating would just be to survive, then God's instruction to the human being right at the onset wouldn't be about eating. God would be instructing what's the business he has to do over here. It's like, if you bring in a new worker and you're talking to him about the job, the first thing you don't talk to him about is the cafeteria. The cafeteria is important. You'll need lunch. There's a cafeteria. You can go down and have yourself lunch. It's the first thing you talk. You give him him or her the job description. What are you expecting? What is it they need to do? Why are you here? Why did you come visit? Why are you going to spend 40 hours a week in this factory? What are you going to be doing? Happens to be one of the last instructions is lunch hour is from then and then. If you want to go down over there, there's a cafeteria. You can go get yourself something to eat. That's a nice thing to say. If God would God created the human being, the prize creation of all of his creations, that is going to lead the entire world to its purpose, he's going to list to him a whole bunch of things. And then at the end, he should perhaps speak to him about the 10 commandments. And then in the end, he's going to tell him about eating. He tells him what you can eat, what you can't eat. The first thing he tells him about eating, or was the second item on the list. What does that teach you? That teaches us that eating is no small deal. Actually, through eating, we fix the entire world. We were created, I know people like when I say this. I definitely like it. We were created to eat, but we were created to eat the way we should eat. And what does the creation of eating mean? Because here's the idea. Why did God create us that we should constantly need food? So we had many classes on this. Why did God create us to be so weak that we have to fuel our bodies continuously? We waste so much time just eating, preparation of food, and then figuring out how to make the monies in order to be able to buy the stuff that we need in order to make food. If we were to take food out of our lives, we would have so much extra time. And God created the human body that it should need food, not just the human body. And the answer for that is because it's through eating that we are consumers. And when we consume the energies of the world and we elevate them. So when we take vegetables and the vegetables somehow, or grains, and the grains, whether it's the 5 grains, which we make matzah and bread from, or whether it's the rice and other types of things, which aren't literally grains, but whatever they are, corn and all this, and we use them and we eat them. So all these things now become consumed in the human body. Now the question is, what is the human body better than a corn stalk? A corn on the cob. Why is the human body more special? What's so great about it becoming human? What's wrong with the wheat being wheat and the barley being barley? The answer is, when it's barley and wheat, it does not really have a conscious and open relationship with its creator. It doesn't recognize its creator. So therefore it's far and distant from its creator. When we eat it and the food becomes part of our bodies, there is a soul to the food. The food too has a soul. It has a spark. It has an energy. And that energy is now coming much closer to God because it's become unified into the human, and the human has a relationship with God. So first of all, through eating, everything goes a notch up through the whole process of food. The inanimate, the earth, releases all of its power and all of its energy, not all, but a lot of its power and a lot of its energy into the food that it produces, into all the vegetation that it produces. So the inanimate kind of gives itself is elevated into the plant life. Plant life either goes directly towards the consumption of humans, or the plants get eaten by animals, which is a higher form of life. Animals are more advanced than plants. So it's already elevated. So now the energy that was once inanimate went into a plant, and the plants, it was already elevated. Then it gets elevated again by becoming animal fuel, and then it becomes the flesh and the blood of the animal. And then the animals, some of those animals get eaten by humans. And as a result of that, they enter into the human body and into the human consciousness. Well, sometimes being inside of a human body, it's actually uglier and darker than when it was an animal. Because sometimes humans can, God forbid, behave worse than animals in despicable, selfish ways that are just really horrific. But we're not talking about that, because God doesn't, that's not on God's mind. I mean, he obviously he's aware and he knows, and everybody gets everybody has to give a reckoning one day. But that's not where the purpose of creation lies. Purpose in creation lies in the people who make good choices, to do the good things with the energy they eat from that food. When they do mitzvahs, when they do godly things, help the world, advance the world, make lives of people better, do a lot of charity and goodness and kindness. And for the Jewish people, we learn Torah and we do mitzvot, thereby connecting to God. All these energies are now elevated and elevated and elevated. Now, just becoming human is already an elevation. But when the human engages in the knowledge of God, and especially when the human has an emotional, fiery bond with his or her creator, which takes place during prayer, what happens to these energies are that the energies melt back into the infinite light of God. That's how we elevate the world. The whole process of elevation. In the time when the temple stood, it was visible. Literally, you can see it. You can see this whole system of a paradigm, how things, even though you had a big world, but the main transporter of energies was taking place in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem on the mountaintop. And on that mountaintop, things were being consumed in a heavenly fire. Energy that was once part of creation is now being elevated. There used to be a lion, a god, a form of a lion, a heavenly lion that came down, which was representing the angelic beings of above, the face of the lion that's in the chariot. It was down on the altar, which means a very, very lofty level of angelic beings who are in a state of super conscious of God and super passionate and super fired up with the divine. And as we brought a animal or a meal offering, and it was literally put into that fire, all this energy is now suctioned back up to its source. And what does that do? That keeps God attached to his minuscule, tiny little creation. And it keeps him interested and excited. And you know what? As appreciation of what we've elevated to him, God intensifies his showering of blessings of life to the world, with the ideal and the purpose that we continue this process. But it's not. But you would think it's a vain process, because if it's like a water fountain where the water is going back up and then it's falling back down and going back up and it's just rotating, what is it? We're taking energies, we're elevating it. That in turn gives God's blessing, so God infuses the world with new life. So there's now new plants, and the new plants and new animals and more animals, and then it keeps on going around and around. See, where you're getting to. But once something is recreated again, it's back in a low state. So what's the point? The answer is no. The answer is, with every day and every time we do mitzvahs, and specifically every time we're bringing these sacrifices, the creation is inching inch by inch, closer and closer, and becoming more unified, more connected, more attached to its creator, until we reach the ultimate state of elevated consciousness that is going to be in all of existence and all of creation when Mashiach comes. But it's all accomplished through eating. If we wouldn't eat, then everything would remain in its spot. Through eating and through sacrifices. Today's days, when we don't have a temple, the sages say that our table is like the altar, because food is also a means, because just like there was a heavenly fire, a lion, the image of a lion that was on the altar, consuming the sacrifices, which represented a divine light that was coming down, a divine, Hashem is compared to a fire, and it was consuming and suctioning up all these energies. Same as also when we create, our heart is the altar. And in our heart, we create a fiery passion and fervor to Hashem in prayer. And all the food we eat, because having an emotional experience, an intense emotional experience, is exhausting. Really, while we're experiencing it's very intense, but afterwards you're wiped out. So what happened? All your energy, literally, it consumed your energy. The energies of your whole power gets consumed in it. And if that power is from the food you ate yesterday or last week, and you're burning calories, which is all this, and you're burning it up in holiness, it's all being consumed in God. Now, the epitome of the human being who was in the state of having the rectified mind to be able to elevate everything was the priests in the temple. Because here's the idea. As we said earlier, something can make its way from the inanimate to the vegetable, from the vegetable to the animal, and from the animal to the human, and instead of it being elevated, it's only being corrupted. Because if that human being is living in defiance of God, if that human being is living in total separate consciousness and is stuck up completely in his or her own ego and living a very selfish existence, so what's the gain? It didn't bring any. Quite on the contrary, that person can be using that energy that they've gotten from the food for negative purposes, for horrible things. You had a school shooter just yesterday. The person can take, from the lunch they ate yesterday and go out, God forbid, and shoot children. God should protect everybody. So this is not an elevation. So we understand always that the elevator, the one who is elevating, needs to be in a rectified consciousness, on an elevated state. That's why we have a very interesting instruction. We're told that halachically, we're not supposed to eat before prayer. The first thing one has to do in the morning immediately is pray. You can study first so that you can organize your mind and then pray. And only after prayer are you allowed to eat. Today's day is due to the weakening of people's bodies and minds, and just in general, we don't have the same determination like they used to have years ago, spiritual capacities. It is recommended that we eat something when we wake up, just that we have strength to pray. Because or else if we'll be praying and the whole time thinking about the food. But it's not okay to sit down and eat a serious meal, even today's days. It is recommended, eat something, drink something, eat something, just that you have a little nourishment, so you're not like starving, and then you can pray. Why do you have to pray before you eat? What's the reason why we have to pray before we eat? The answer is because the prayer is not just meant to pray to God for our needs. Prayer is a time of meditation, a time of elevating our consciousness. It's a time that we peel away our ego and we discover our soul, our deeper soul, which our soul is living in a state of connectivity to God. And when we're in a state of connectivity to God, we're conscious of God and we're connected to God, then afterwards we eat, then we are in a rectified state, in an elevated state. We're actually even higher than the angels because our souls come from a place above and beyond the angels on a much deeper connection. And as a result of that, we serve as that higher altar, and that everything that we eat now becomes consumed in the human, and the human is godly because you filled yourself with godly consciousness. And as a result of that, you've elevated all these what we call sparks of holiness that are embedded and lost, and retrieved them all and unified them in the divine, in the source. But if you didn't pray, then when we're eating like a cow. What difference? You're eating without any higher intentions, without any mindfulness. Because when we wake up in the morning naturally, we only feel our most external level of our awareness. We feel our human or maybe even animal side. It takes work to get deeper into yourself. It takes thoughtfulness, which is what prayer is all about. The holy words of prayer, if we add to it some meditation, takes us into a different zone in which we're going to spend the day doing what's right, not doing what my stomach craves or what my physical body craves. Now, if I'm operating from my animalistic self, then everything I'm consuming it into the animal inside of me, which is not elevating it at all. But if I am operating and my entire state of consciousness, my entire direction in life is for a higher purpose, then all this thing is elevated. Now we understand who these priests were. A priest who served in the temple was a person who was on a very high level. And their level of consciousness and the level of, they were so sharply aware that God is the only reality. They were so selfless. And in a state of deep, deep love for the world and love, and an amazing, unbelievable, intense love for God. And they had no ego, no self. And when they ate, it was purely for the mitzvah. That's why they ate sacrificial meat. It wasn't a barbecue. It wasn't a festival day when you poured, mustard and ketchup and relish just to have a good time. Even though they were supposed to eat the food in a way that it was tasty. They were supposed to actually eat it in a way that showed respect and honor. But at the same time, they were supposed to transcend their animalistic craving and eat for a higher purpose. That's the idea of the priest. Based on this idea, which is that what? That a rectified being, only a rectified being, a being who is already in a state of oneness with God, only that being is able to elevate and eat properly and consume and so then the question becomes, when we read the verse and we find out that Aaron himself has to bring a sacrifice, what does that mean? He has to bring an offering. You see, the offering wasn't, let me just add one more point. The offering, when a person brought an offering, whether it was an animal offering or whether it was a vegetable offering, a grain offering, whatever that offering was, it wasn't, the action of the priest was not only to elevate the consciousness of the animal or the meal offering, it was also to elevate the human. The person bringing it was elevated together with that which they brought. It was an enormous, incredible spiritual elevation when you came into the temple. You didn't leave the same person you walked in. You were so deeply impacted. You were so, and that's why we were waiting every day for Mashiach to come to have that experience again. Because when you went in there, into that holy place, it transformed you, metamorphosized you. You walked out a different person. So the same elevation that's taking place on the animal also took place even deeper on the person bringing it. It's just that human sacrifices are not permitted. So we didn't put the human into that, but the animal was brought up, but the human went along in that high level, in that consumption, if you can say. But in order to be elevated, you needed a mentor and a teacher. Who was the mentor and the teacher? That was the priest. That's why there were people. And what was the thing about the priests? Priests were people that were not business people or working people who were involved with mundane activities. When you engage and involve yourself with physical, earthy things, it rubs off on you. It makes a person thick and dense. It densens your consciousness. But the priests were dedicated to higher things. They studied all day long. They were in a very high level, and they had a lot of deep mystical training in the mystical aspects of Torah. They had the deepest understanding of the divine, of the infinite. And as a result of that, they were able to elevate. So now the midrash has a question. How can the one who eats become the one that's eaten? Meaning, if we say that Aaron has to bring a sacrifice, has to bring an offering, remember, the elevation is not only in the thing you're bringing, but in the person that's bringing it. They too are being elevated. If he is the one who's elevating everything, and you can't elevate unless you're elevated, so what's the point of Aaron bringing a sacrifice? For that, the midrash is bringing, well, we see the same thing. That was Samson's question. The lion, and when he said the lion, he meant more than just that physical lion. The physical lion that he tore was just a metaphor. He's referring to the lion that was on the altar. The image of a supernal lion that was consuming he's the eater, the one that's consuming all the animals. How is he eaten as well? Does he himself have to be elevated? He's the elevator. He's the rectifier of everything. And the answer to that is, we have a prophecy in the days of Mashiach. You're going to eat those who are eating. You're going to eat those that are eating. And here is an amazing mystical teaching. But put on your seatbelts. because I am really going to frighten you now. Okay? I'm going to really scare you, but then I'm going to save you at the end. Not me saving you. I'm just telling you what it says in the books. But this is a frightening thought. If you quit the share, either quit now, listening now, or quit when I'm at the end. Don't quit within the next 10 minutes. Okay? So here's the idea. The human is the eater, the one in charge of elevating all of creation and elevating things and eating it through eating. We know that eating people is cannibalism. That's not kosher. God warns us not to do that. But there is a prophecy that says that the eaters will be eaten. That's scary, huh? So when you read it first glance, it seems that that's literally what happens. But let me first explain. When we say that the human is the one who eats, what are we eating? We're eating the animals, the vegetable, which come from the inanimate, come from the mineral, right? So the three lower forms of life. How about angels? Angels seem to be higher than us because they're in the spiritual worlds and they're greater, they have the higher consciousness than us. So we would think that the angels are supposed to be eating us, but it's not that way. The humans eat the angels as well. And how does that happen? Humans eat angels because there's an amazing teaching. This is the Alter Rebbe in his mimer here. We learned it many years ago, beginning of Parshas Tzav. He says like this: Hashem gives food to the angels every day. Their food is not physical food. Their food is the radiance of the Shekhinah, the radiance of God's light. The reason they need to eat is they need strength to be able to love God. They need enormous strength to be able to comprehend and apprehend His infinite greatness. So Hashem is feeding them constantly with strength. But these angels are called spiritual beasts. If you take a look in the prophets, you find many verses that refer to the angels as beasts, as animals. We spoke, the supernal lion, the supernal ox, these are animals. We say them in prayer, we say V'ofanim v'chayos HaKodesh, and the holy beasts. So what happens is like this: when they eat, they consume this food that's coming from above them. It's a different form of eating. Our food is coming from below us. We're elevating. Their eating is coming from above. It's going into the angels. But the angels are taking the food that they eat and they're producing from them a lower form of food. And then a lower form of food and a lower form of food, which really means that the angels themselves are manifesting in lower forms of creatures. They formulate from their higher, more spiritual state. They become more condensed and more condensed and more condensed and more condensed. And eventually all the spiritual beings above end up in this world as what? As vegetation. Angels are called trees. The sages say there isn't a blade of grass in this world that doesn't have an angel on top of it. What does that mean? It means that when the spiritual energies descend lower and lower and lower, they eventually materialize into the physical things in this world, including the animals and vegetation. And it's all in preparation that the human should come and eat them. When you're eating a salad, you're eating a bunch of angels. So that we didn't think of. When we're eating a salad, you have a whole salad of angels. Oh, up there, these are cosmic forces. They're unbelievably powerful and great. They are enormous. We would see one of them, we would pass out. We couldn't handle it, the amount of energy. But when their energies come down into this world, they become cucumbers, tomatoes, some jalapenos, the angry angels, or the like very intense ones. They become avocados, they become everything. Asparagus, sweet potato, regular potato, carrots, onions, garlic, all the stuff, because everything has a spiritual source. And they all descend into this world. But why are they descending here? So that we humans will eat them. And why does the human have to eat them? Sorry for that, I got a little cold here, or allergies rather. Why does the human have to eat them? Because the human soul is higher than the angels. The human soul, the angels come from the, in the chariot above, there is the lion, the ox, these are all. But on top of the chariot sits a man. Who's the man? That's God himself. The souls are called human because they are directly coming and stemming from God himself. Every soul is a little piece of God himself. That's the soul. Primarily the Jewish soul is a little mamish pnei adam, literally the face, from the face of the man above. So therefore, these angels, they too need to be elevated into man. Now, they don't get elevated into man up there. They get elevated to man when they come down here. So that's why they all descending. As they descend, then they come down into the physical things. When we eat them, and we eat them the right way, if God forbid we don't eat them the right way, then we're messing everything up. But when we eat them the right way and use our energies to do good things, then all of this is rectified. All of existence is rectified. So the angels become food by going into, they literally descend into the physical food. Humans eat them. And here is a phenomenal teaching that the holy Ari, the great Kabbalist, the Ari says. He says, and here's the scary thought that I spoke to you before. Says that in the future, when Mashiach is going to be here, new souls are going to come down into the world. The new souls that are going to come into the world, souls that have never been here, souls whose spiritual capacity is going to be beyond. I know I'm saying only 4 to 5 times beyond, but you can go on saying this forever. Anything that we've ever seen before. Why? Let me explain to you why. Because the souls that come now come from, they're godly, they're divine, souls are divine. But the souls come from the tiny little thread that Hashem had revealed after the great black hole. In Kabbalah and mysticism, let me do this very briefly, it discusses that initially the infinite light was everywhere. So there was no room for creation. And then Hashem carved out a tiny little black hole, which means he created a vacancy in an empty space. So there should be room for creation to exist. And into that black hole means there's nothing there. It's just empty. There's no presence. There's no revealed presence of God. Into that black hole, God reinserted, but this time only a tiny little thin thread of his light. That thin thread is the life force of creation on all levels, infinite. And therefore, and that thin level is called the supernal man. It's all within that thin thread. And therefore, all the souls that are here today, as great as they are from somewhere from that thread. No one has ever entered from the infinite light. A soul plucked out directly from the infinite, from outside the circle. After Mashiach comes, the souls that are going to come down are going to be souls that are coming directly, in the words of the Arizal, from Sovev Kalalman, from the encompassing and infinite light of God. And therefore their capacity is going to be immeasurable, bigger and holier and godlier than anything we've ever seen. And just like the way the angels are elevated today, how is that? By the humans eating the angels. So the current humans, the current souls are going to have to be eaten by those souls. And that's what it means, v'achaltem ochoil, you will eat those, the eaters. Those who were told now, the ones that were eating everything else, will then be eaten. So if you stop over here, and then it would seem to be almost that. And how? How will we be eaten? How? Who's going to eat? Oh, the future tzaddikim, the future saintly people, the future souls that are going to be in bodies. So eat means literally eat. So what does that mean? We're all going to become lunch? Maybe. Anybody scared? No. So let's do it step by step. What he says is, they will all become part of the big fish and the big ox that is going to be eaten at the great feast that is going to be in the future. So we've heard of this thing called the Leviathan, the big fish, and the mighty, mighty wild boar that is going to be the meat and the fish at the great feast in the future. He says all souls are going to enter, just like the angels enter into the food, so too the souls are going to enter into the fish and into this great beast, and are going to be eaten by the tzaddikim, by the righteous, by the saintly of the future, those who have those higher souls, and as a result of that, they're going to be elevated into the capacity of infinite godliness, just like animals are elevated into that consciousness through human consumption, and angels are being entered through human consumption. Souls of today are going to have to be consumed into that higher level of consciousness. We're going to have to go on a trip and a type of elevation that we can't do on our own. The only way we can go there is if someone of that stature eats us into it. So that doesn't sound too inspiring for anybody. So that's why I would like to add the redeeming line. This is the redeeming line. The Alter Rebbe says these words. You know what? You shouldn't think I'm making this stuff up. I like to read it from the Hebrew to you, so you get it. Therefore, yitztarchu. Well, let me read the whole few lines together here. Just like the angels of now, are considered animals in comparison to the souls. Because they come from the animals and the beasts from the chariot, which are only recipients from the supernal man. So too, even the souls that are now, which are very high, if we compare them to the souls that are going to be revealed after the coming of Mashiach, they're also called animals. That there are souls that are called animals. We're called man, but only compared to angels. But to compare to the real men, which is the real human, which are the souls of the future. Okay. Therefore, all souls that are alive now will have to also be elevated in those souls. How? Al Yadesha is Gashmu. It will happen through the souls will become materialized. V'yerdu, and they will descend b'pchinas macholim, and they will enter into the food, hagashmim, physical food, leviyasan v'shar habar, the big fish called the leviyasan and the shar habar. V'hatzadikim yoichlu oisam, and the righteous will eat them. V'yalu l'sharsham, and they will raise them up to their source. As hamacholim, the food that they ate, kidugma shanashamas ta'ata, in the same way that today's days we are the eaters, the souls are the eaters. Ma'ilem hamacholim gashmiyim, raise up and elevate the physical food. Sheshar shama malachim, we elevate the physical food that comes from the angels into human. But our human is not considered the ultimate human. So the humans today are going to be eaten by being again invested into physical food, and as a result of that, the tzaddikim of the future will eat. And then, okay, so this is all scary. So thank God for this little parentheses over here. V'karev adavar bivadai, it is very close and almost certain. If the Alter Rebbe or the Tzemach Tzedek says, I don't know whose parentheses this is, whose note this is, when he says it's close to say and almost sure, certainly, loima. Sharak nitzutz va'adam v'neshamis yedid v'neslabish b'leviyasim v'shayra bar. Only a little spark of our soul has to go down and becoming clothed in this big fish, giant fish, and in the meat, hagashmi. We don't need that the entire being. We can just share a spark. We just have to make a little investment. We have to put one of our sparks into it. That's it. Why? And as soon as the tzaddikim of the future will eat just the spark, and a little ray of our souls, it will raise not only the spark and the rays, but it will raise up and it will elevate the entire source as well. The whole root will also, which means the person himself. So somehow a piece of ourselves will be in the Shayra Bar and Al Yasim, but it doesn't mean we have to become gefilte fish or sushi. Pretty redeeming thought. And that's the way it is by sacrifices. Why? Because by sacrifices, one lamb elevates all the angels. Even though it's only one lamb, that means they made an investment. They take a little spark. It's not like all the angels came down and we offer them all on the temple. It's only one lamb every day, and there's billions of angels being elevated. Because it's just a little bit of their DNA. It's a little bit of their spiritual DNA that descends into this animal and is elevated. Sure. And that's the idea. And that's the meaning, v'achaltam achal, we're going to be eating. And then he goes on to explain, and that's the reason, when we say Aaron and his sons, Aaron is very high, he himself, and he is in a very rectified state. He's even a high, right? And that's why he can elevate everything, but there's no end to elevation. And the elevation of the future is going to go higher and higher and higher, even to a point, as we said, that the elevator himself has to be elevated. The Rebbe adds, our Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe adds to this in one of his discourses. What's the continuation of the verse? Because the Alter Rebbe also talks about it later. What is the continuation of the verse that says, and my people will not be ashamed forever? So the Alter Rebbe has his explanation what that means. We won't be ashamed forever. The verse continues and says, we will thank God for what he has done for us, lahafli. He has done wonders. That's referring to the wonderful elevation. The elevation which will be so high that we will stop being recipients of God, but we will be so identified with Hashem that we will be the influencers, not recipients anymore. And therefore we won't have any shame anymore. Because when you're a recipient, you feel shamed. People don't like to take. They like to give. When Mashiach will come, we won't be any more a recipient of any divine blessings. We will be the blessers. We will have the power to bless. We won't have to receive anything because we will be him. And we will be the infinite. And that's the reason why it says that angels will say to the righteous when Mashiach comes, holy, holy, holy. Just when the angels are saying holy, 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 they're drawing down energy. They're downloading from God, from the transcendental. We are going to be in such a level of transcendence, such a level of perfect identification with our source, to the point that the source is us. We're no more a recipient from our source. We are the source. And as a result of that, there's no more shame and there's no more embarrassment. No more the embarrassment of having to be the recipient. That's the meaning of the conclusion of the words. My nation will not be embarrassed anymore. My people won't be embarrassed anymore. The Rebbe, in his discourse, explains, the question is, will that second elevation just be something that will happen on its own? Or is that something that we ourselves can generate through our own service? Because today's days, we are doing service to elevate everything. To elevate the world, elevate ourselves, and elevate everything around us. Now, these powerful Messianic elevations that are going to happen in the future, are they going to happen to us just as gifts from above? Or are we going to have the capacity to generate that elevation? So the Rebbe says that what the verse is saying, you won't be ashamed, meaning it's going to be something that we will be able to do on our own. In other words, to make those leaps, because the depth of our service of Hashem today gives us such potency and such capacity to be able to even do those immeasurable leaps that we will take after the redemption is here. So what's the takeaway from all of this? First of all, it's good to know that we're not going to be lunch. But on the other hand, it's good to know that big days are coming, and our consciousness and our elevation is going to grow unbelievable. It's also really cool to know that the souls that are going to be coming after Mashiach comes are such super souls. In other words, we've seen great men in the past. We've seen like the greatest rabbis and the greatest saintly people and like unbelievable mystics. But it's nothing compared to what is about to happen. Once God unleashes these higher, incredible souls that are going to reveal themselves when Mashiach comes, it's going to be pretty awesome. And I'm excited. It's about to happen. And Hashem help that already this Pesach, we should already make the transition into those beautiful, magnificent days of the future. Everyone take care till we meet again. Be'ezras Hashem.